everybody. This is our old established tradition that helps us deepen our sense of community, which is something we very much need. Know each other better. In the foreseeable future, we will indeed return to our old meeting format in the fireside room with refreshments and one-on-one conversations, and it will be very nice. Meanwhile, we have been able to respond to a demand that presentations be taped and made available. So this is happening. Kim Holscher and Dave Teta are making sure that recordings are getting to the office for transfer to our website.
No, please don't record tonight. Jerene has asked that we do not.
All right. Very good. Thank you. So thank you, Carol Kerr, for publicizing these events. So today, Jerene DeLaney will speak for about a half hour, after which there will be time for questions. And if you wish to ask a question, please put your name in the chat box and I will look at it and call on you. Very good. Jerene, the floor is yours.
But first, could we stop the recording, please?
Ooh, Jerene, you are muted.
Well, that was a good way to start. That's the way we'll stay. I chose not to have it recorded because it said something about YouTube, not just our website.
So the YouTube is a private YouTube that only can be accessed if you have the link. And the link is what gets published on the website.
Okay, you may record if you want to.
Thank you.
I understood that. I did not understand that. And I didn't want that going out all over the world.
Broadcast all over the world, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Woohoo!
Yeah, I checked on that.
Okay. Well, let me begin by saying I'm relatively nervous about this because I'm going to go into something that only a few people know, and those are people that I know and trust and have been fairly close to. But I was born in Independence, Missouri, and Friday the 13th of November, I was breech, butt first, and I've always considered that my first political statement. You know, kiss my birth mother was Betty. She was 15 when married my father. She gave birth to a premature son at the age of 15 who lived a month, and his name was Terry, Terry. She was 16 when I was born, Jerry, Jerry. So that was Jerry Suzanne DeLaney. My birth father, Clyde, was a master sergeant in the Army in the European theater. This was, of course, during World War II. Betty took me to New Orleans while Clyde was overseas when I was 10 months old. Clyde's mother, living in Oklahoma, was suspicious of her lifestyle and informed Clyde, who had her followed. She was picked up by the police and arrested for prostitution. My grandmother was given temporary custody until the war ended. It was very unusual during that period of time for the government to allow divorces over mail. They really encouraged the soldiers to go back home and iron out the problems before they went through that process. Toward the end of the war, Clyde, this is my birth father, was stationed in Iceland after he had left Europe. He met Alice, a captain in the Red Cross, and post-war they married in Minnesota, which is where her home state was. Alice told him that he could leave me with his mother or take me with them to Santa Barbara. I went to Santa Barbara when I was 3.5 or 4, somewhere in there. Sometimes some of this gets a little foggy, with a strong Southern accent. I was used to my grandmother saying, "Yo, get over here, Jesu." So we moved into a newly built GI housing project. It was a wonderful place to grow up, rows and rows of project housing, all with thin walls on both sides for the returning GIs and their families. There was no shortage of kids, all born during the war. Open the front door and you had friends climbing trees, skating, hopscotch, Red Rover. Outside was my safe place. Inside, not so much. I was a very severely battered child by Clyde. Alice was an activist, a teacher, and wasn't around very much. Alice, and I'm using her name because I was not permitted to call her mother, was planning to divorce Clyde when I was 7. And when she learned of his philandering. Before she could do that, she was told by lawyers and a judge that I would go to an orphanage unless she adopted me. And they had records of police calls to the house when he was visiting me. Clyde did not know she was divorcing him. They hired detectives to locate Betty. Seems like I had a lot of detectives going after me and stuff in my life. And they hired a lot of detectives to go after my biological mother to just get papers signed. Post-adoption, I was told that I could call her mother now. Immediately, the divorce happened. My mother was completely void of any empathy and a person that had no desire to parenting. She was emotionally vacant and didn't have a maternal bone in her body. But she was a great teacher of ethics, morality, integrity, personal responsibility, politics, and civics. I was taught to always go to the source if there was a problem, even if that person was in authority. Stay with it and no one else until it was solved or you or the other person or the group decide it's unsolvable. Anything else would be gossip. She led by example. I could never tell her if a little friend said something about me. Stop, that's gossip. You go to your friend and you work it out. Friday nights, she would take me to the roller rink. I love to skate. I had a little boyfriend there who would lace up my skates and off we'd go. She met a guy named Chuck there and they skated, excuse me, and they skated together and then hung out on the sidelines and talked. Little sip here. Not vodka, water. He was floundering in his religion. He left the Catholic Church and was in search of a free-thinking religion. She introduced him to Unitarianism. She switched from her family's Lutheranism to Unitarianism in college. She invited him to the Sunday service, and boom, a Unitarian was born. They started dating. You can tell by the time frame I was reared Unitarian. The merger hadn't happened yet. There was no universalism. I loved my church and the minister, Reverend Robert Blake. I thought he was my minister. When I was 9, my mother got a better teaching job in Stockton. We moved there and she bought her first and only house. Late that night, the doorbell was ringing and my dog was barking. My mother went to the door to find Chuck there. They talked all night. When I woke up, I was woke, just like the youth are today. They told me that they were getting married, asked me what I thought of it. It was okay by me. Parental figures come and they go, doesn't matter. He was an alcoholic and bipolar. He tried everything he could. I don't remember when he wasn't in therapy. In fact, he did Janos' primal scream, and both parents would fly to LA for therapy with Ayn Rand and Nathaniel Branden. He also had multiple episodes of electric shock therapy. He committed suicide with my birth father's German Luger that my birth father had taken off a German officer he had killed. He was about 75 years old. He had tried three times that I know of before. The focus in the house was always on Chuck and my mother's activism with politics, civil rights, and the women's movement. When I was 14, my mother was home with a cold. I came home from school and was heading to my bedroom when she said, "We're going to LA to introduce you to your biological mother, Betty." Okay, what's another parent in the mix? I had a rocky high school time with grades, hard to concentrate with a lot of fighting between the two of the parents. I graduated from high school and found I was too young to be admitted to the RN program. My mother knew the husband of one of the teachers of the LVN program, and she got me into the exam and I was admitted. I got a job in one of the hospitals and now had a way to support myself. I decided to leave home and get an apartment. When I was about to leave, my mother and Chuck were standing at the door with their hands out. I was perplexed and said, "What?" And they said, "Hand in your keys. This house does not have a revolving door. You, as always, are responsible for your own decisions. You have chosen to be an adult." I was now a visitor in their home. I got an apartment and worked in Stockton for a short period of time. And then I now consider this next part to be my biggest mistake. I thought it would be kind of nice to be around a real family. They were fun and humorous, and I enjoyed getting to know them for a while. I had talks with Betty, birth mother, about why I was taken from her. She lied constantly and not with any consistency at all. The values, standards, personal responsibilities that were instilled in me as soon as Alice and Clyde picked me up when I was 3.5 to 4 were totally absent. These people were fed by chaos, drama. They were poor and thought nothing of cheating, lying, even stealing, actually. It was like a soap opera, but Betty and Richard, her husband, were charming, but short on scruples and not very clean. Around 21, I moved to San Francisco and started my prereqs for the RN training. Working at UCSF in kidney transplant, cardiovascular, 2 days a week, and medical, 3 days a week. Medical was where the real brains were. I found it incredible that to have no diagnosis at all, people couldn't figure it out. And the docs had to go through this and wade through every little minuscule kind of test and blood and whatever to find what was going on with this patient. Boy, I'll tell you, that was really quite an experience. And I loved it. I really did. I was getting my prereqs when I got blocked. I had my first in 1962 of 5 spinal fusions on my back, the last being complete fusion, and that was 1969. And they put rods and springs and bolts into my spine. And I haven't had a back problem since. But what happened was the first time I had ever approached this subject, and my doctor came into the room and said, "Well, what happened? Were you in an accident?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Did you fall?" I said, "No." And he said, "I know you play sports. Did you harm yourself in sports?" I said, "No." And he said, "What was in your back had nothing to do with what you were born with. It had to do with injuries. What happened?" And so I had to think about it for a little bit. And all of a sudden the light bulb went on. And I said, "Oh, well, okay." I used to get kicked up and down the hall in our place with steel-toed boots. My birth father taught me to my left foot from my right foot when I was tiny, and by saying, like you would in the army, "Hut, lift, up, right, that kind of stuff." And then he would say both, and I had to lift both my feet up and fall on my butt or get beat. So take your pick. And so that did a lot of damage, that and a lot more. It did a lot of damage to the spine. There, the problem was solved. And he said, "Yeah," he said, "that's going to do it." So there was a lot of scar tissue back there was the problem, and it had impinged upon the vertebral column. So after that, it was I was not really able to go to back to adult nursing because I was lifting heavy patients with cardiovascular. somebody, especially men that were way taller than I was, would have a what we call a fempop bypass, but you would have to get them out of bed straight-legged. They could not bend at their groins. And so you'd have to help them out of bed and just pick them straight up like this. And I couldn't do that anymore. I wasn't allowed to. It was like, nope, your lifting patients days are over. So I wound up in the intensive care nursery at the University of California. And I found it an exciting place. I was a little afraid at the beginning because the babies were so small. What if I broke one? Because there were a lot of preemies there. But I loved it. I grew to love it very rapidly. And I loved my babies and I loved my parents and the families. And I was limited in what I could do because I was still in LVN, but I was still doing my prereqs, working full time and trying to get through it all. But I was well on my way. I knew exactly where I wanted to be for the rest of my profession. I met Karen in 1976, and she had been told I was straight. There was an instant attraction. People may have thought or assumed I was straight because I had just broken off a dating bill for 13 years. The thing about it was Bill and I never had any kind of an agreement or anything. It was more dating than anything else. And we could date anybody we wanted. I mean, nobody had any commitments anywhere. He was a great date. You know, are you off the weekend? Yes. Okay, come meet me downtown. So I'd meet him downtown. So where are we going? We're going to let's go to LA and go to Disneyland and have dinner on the Queen Mary. Oh, okay. You know, I mean, that's a kind of date, you know. And I will tell you, this is a little off the beaten path here, but I will tell you that what broke this up was we had been to dinner and dancing at the Fairmont Hotel. Now I ask you, does it get any straighter than that? And we were on the way back in the car, and Bill said, well, we've been dating for 13 years. Don't you think we should do something about this? And I said, yeah, I guess we should. Maybe we should end it. And well, I didn't say maybe we should end. I said, yeah, I think you're right. And he said, so let's get married. And I just went numb for a minute. And I said, you know, I was kind of going in the other direction. I was thinking, let's just get on with our lives and meet somebody that we really want to stay with the rest of our lives. So that kind of ended the relationship. Wide open for Karen. Now I had dated women during the time I was dating Bill, I have to confess. But when we met, the attraction was so strong, and it stayed that way, and it still is. She had just moved in with me and jumped one ship for another here. She got a job with USGS aboard a research vessel in the Bering Sea, and I went straight into the RN program. So she was gone right after we started living together, she was gone for a period of time. I worked at Mount Zion as an LVN going through the RN program. I wanted to continue at Mount Zion after I graduated. They gave me lower pay because my state boards hadn't come in to say I had passed. After a month or so, I thought this stunk. So I marched myself down to the administration office of the nurses building, you know, nursing, the big honcho of nurses. And I told her that I just didn't think that this was a fair agreement, and that I got more money as an LVN than I was getting waiting for my RN, assuming that I'm going to pass. And so since you don't permit new grads in the ICN, I will work developing a program for this to change. There is no reason we can't have mentoring programs for new grads. Guess what? It worked. And so what happened was I then said, now about the pay. And she said, I will make it up to you. I promise. I just don't know how. You have to take my word for it. Well, I wasn't big on taking people's words at that time, but I thought, okay. And I said, I'll be back if this doesn't work out, don't you? And she said, yeah. And she came through with flying colors. And the next thing I knew, I got this whopping check for all the back pay of the discrepancy between an LVN and being a in-betweener between an RN and an LVN. And she kept her word, and I was just so pleasantly surprised. Now, the next problem was that I was a new RN, but I wasn't a new nurse to an ICN. So now what do you do with me? And they don't hire new RNs. And so they made an exception. And I said, we've got to make a program. There's no reason we're not mentoring new RNs. And so another nurse there on the administrative part of the nursing, and I set about making that happen after my exams came in and I had passed. And I was working full time, and I had passed, so I was cool every which way. And I said, okay, now let's get together and let's get this going. And because new RNs can be just as interested in preemies and critically ill newborns as people that have been working a long time. What's the difference, So we did, and all worked out well, and I loved it. It was one of the greatest experiences. I was excited to go to work every day. I loved going on transports and flying off to someplace and picking up a critically ill baby and stabilizing that child and going through the process of having the parents just absolutely in third spacing out because all of a sudden we were going to take their baby away from them, and it was heartbreaking. And to talk the mother through that and to try to get the baby with all the tubes that we had in them into the isolette to the mother's bedside so that she could at least reach into the porthole and touch her baby, and daddy could too, at least touch them. And I would always promise, I'll call you immediately when we land. I promise you that. And I'll call after we get the baby all hooked up where we are on a bed. I will call you and tell you everything's okay or whatever's going on. You will never have to worry about what's going on. We'll tell you everything. And so it was exciting. We had to walk people certainly through death and dying. And that in itself was not exciting, but it was satisfying to see a struggling baby and help the family through the quietness of leaving this planet or wherever. I had a passion for this job, and it wasn't a job. It was a wonderful place to be. I had the passion. I have the passion. And in a minute, in a heartbeat, I would go back, but I can't. So I retired at 50 after working in the hospitals for 33 years, and I taught cooking. I do not like being retired. But here's the problem. I love to travel. I love to ride my trike. I do 20 miles every morning. The other day I did 22. I like cooking. I like gathering with friends, reading, lots of quiet time. I like to camp. My mind tells me I can still play tennis and swim at least a mile a day, play basketball, camp, climb waterfalls. But my body says I left my mind a while back. I grew up Unitarian. And when my mother died, I stood before the pulpit in Stockton, and the first words out of my mouth were, the greatest gift my parents ever gave me was rearing me Unitarian. I never had braces put on my brains. I always had to think my way through a situation or think that I could ask and get questions answered honestly, no matter what they were. I can give you a real good example from when I was little. I came up to my mother and I said, is there a God? And she said, oh, I can't tell you that. She said, I can tell you what I believe, but I can't tell you if there is or isn't. She said, that's something you're going to have to learn for yourself as you grow and you read and you talk to a lot of people and you maybe go from church to find out what you are going to believe in. But to say you know is not the truth. That's what I was told. That, it's kind of like, okay, so I have to think for myself now. And couldn't I just have the answers like all the other kids did? Was kind of my response to that. And it was a great gift. It was just a great gift. So I loved going all the way through it. When I looked out at the group that was gathered in the church there, I looked at them and I said, oh my gosh, how I miss you all. Well, I didn't know absolutely everybody. Some of them were from some of the different organizations she belonged to or organized or led or whatever. And some of them I knew. And some of them were her age and knew me, and I knew them from when I was a little kid. So it was great to see them again. And I am missing them and saying that to my mind in myself. I did not say that out loud. But I thought, holy smoke, I miss community, was what I was saying. And so we talked about it, Karen and I, afterward, after I talked about my mom up there. And by the way, to a person, the people that came up to the pulpit there said that they had never met anybody with such high standards or integrity, that she never broke it, ever. And they all did. And it was like, whoa. But she didn't have anything else. And that was the sad part. There was no balance there for her. Karen and I kind of sealed it when we went to Israel. We landed in Tel Aviv late at night and went to bed, got up in the morning, and it was Saturday morning and it was Shabbat. And we thought, okay, let's go get some breakfast. No, not so much. Everything was closed down. And we went for a walk on the beach, and it was like walking in baby powder. That sand was so fine. And put our sandals back on and just started walking around town. And just, oh my gosh, it was so peaceful, so relaxing, so quiet. And then the shofar went. And that shofar blew, and that thing had to have been, who knew where it came from? We didn't. But that shofar had to have been, I don't know, 150 feet long, because the sound was such a strong bass. And all I could think of was, how long is this person going to hold their breath, to get this sound out? And it was beautiful. And that's all we could hear. There was nobody around. It was amazing. And then we found this little teeny place where we could get a bite to eat. And that was our trip. And so at the time, Karen said, we've got to do this. Our lives are so full and so hectic all the time with going and doing different things and belonging to different things or whatever, that we've got to put this into our lives. And I said, well, you don't want to go back to Judaism, and Unitarian and Judaism, not that, they can marry pretty well. So let's give it a try. So that's how we got to UUCM, was through giving it a try. And we really felt that it was just a wonderful place to be. We loved it. Right after we got there, besides being welcomed so warmly, they said, there's an LGBT Was there a T in there at the time? Anyway, it's LBGTQRSTUZ now. But when we got there, they were going to be a welcoming congregation. And they said, I don't know how they could tell, but they said, would you two like to join us? And for this meeting at the congregation in the fireside room. And we said, well, we would think about it. You know, I mean, we didn't know anybody. And we're both kind of shy. And I'm actually shyer than Karen. And so we thought, okay, well, let's go. So we'll go listen to straight people talk about gay people. And all three of them will just have a discussion together. And we walked into the fireside room and it was packed, just packed, with people who really wanted this to happen. And we almost left in tears. I mean, it was such a lovely experience for a first time at UUCM. Not only the welcoming, but then we go into this and we know how sincerely they were trying to welcome and join this group and become a welcoming congregation. And we loved it. We absolutely loved it. And we were active in it for quite some time. But we really loved the congregation. And I don't think anybody would have any questions after this, would they?
Well, thank you very much. Yes, we are open for questions.